Emeka was a young graphic designer, a budding artist with a laptop full of dreams and a stomach full of anxiety. His small stall, adorned with hand-drawn posters and digital portraits, was his sanctuary from the frantic rhythm of the city. He had only been open a few weeks and was still figuring out how to draw customers in. A man who looked far too calm for the market's pandemonium approached his stall. He wasn't old, but his eyes held a weariness that spoke of many forgotten years. He wore a simple, white linen shirt and trousers that seemed to float around his body, as if they were not made of earthly fabric. He didn't ask for a design, didn't haggle over prices. He simply stood there, a quiet sentinel in the storm. "Young man," the stranger's voice was a low hum, barely audible above the noise. "That sign you have there, the one with the bird, it is beautiful." Emeka, startled but grateful for the compliment, straightened up. "Ah, thank you, sir. I drew it myself. It's an ad for a new logo design I'm offering." The man smiled, a strange, hollow expression that didn't reach his eyes. "And the bird, what does it signify?" "Oh," Emeka explained, "it's an eagle. It represents vision, strength, and soaring above challenges. That's what I want my clients' businesses to do." "Vision," the man repeated softly, his gaze fixed on the eagle. "What a powerful thing. To see what others cannot. To see what is hidden in plain sight." He then lifted his hand and pointed to the small, intricate drawing of the eagle's eye. His finger, long and thin, didn't quite touch the poster, but hovered just a centimeter away. A shiver ran down Emeka's spine. It was as if the air around the man was colder, denser. "That eye," the stranger said, his voice now a mere whisper. "A window to the soul, is it not? A glimpse of a life lived, a destiny fulfilled. Or a destiny forgotten." Without another word, he turned and melted into the crowd as quickly as he had appeared. Emeka was left with a lingering chill and a sense of unease he couldn't shake. He tried to focus on his work, but his mind kept returning to the stranger's chilling words. A destiny forgotten. What could that even mean? That night, Emeka sat on his bed, his laptop open but his mind far away. He told his older sister, Nkechi, about the strange encounter at the market. "He just stood there, Nkechi, asking me about the eagle's eye," Emeka said, a tremor in his voice. It felt wrong. Like he wasn't a person, not a real person. Nkechi laughed, a hearty, dismissive sound. "Emeka, beg. This Lagos, you meet all kinds of characters. Maybe he's an art collector. Or maybe he's just crazy. Don't be so dramatic." She was right, of course. It was probably nothing. But later that night, as the clock on his wall ticked past 3 a.m., Emeka's rational mind was no match for the terror that gripped him. He woke with a jolt, his chest tight, his body immobile. He knew, instinctively, that he was awake. He could see his familiar room, the faint moonlight filtering through the window, the digital clock on his bedside table glowing a silent, ominous red. Then he saw it. A shadow, not like a normal shadow, but a deeper, inky blackness that seemed to absorb the light around it. It stood near the open door, watching him. The air grew heavy, like a suffocating blanket. He tried to scream, to call out for Nkechi, but no sound escaped his lips. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drum against the silence. The shadow seemed to grow, to fill the doorway, its form becoming clearer. It was the man from the market. He didn't move, just stood and stared. And in his eyes, 2 points of light glowed with an unsettling luminescence. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the pressure lifted. Emeka gasped for breath, a ragged, desperate sound. He scrambled backward, his back hitting the cold wall. The shadow was gone. He spent the rest of the night huddled in a corner, his laptop a cold, unyielding comfort against his shaking body. He didn't sleep again. When the morning sun finally broke, he felt a strange, burning sensation in his right hand. He looked down and saw a faint, dark mark just above his wrist. It looked like a smudge, a thumbprint of deep indigo that wasn't there the night before. The moment his mother, Mama Obi, arrived for her weekly visit, Emeka knew he had to tell her. She was a woman of faith and ancient wisdom, who carried the stories of their village, of their ancestors, in her very bones. He told her everything. The strange man, the unsettling words, the paralysis, and the shadowy figure. He showed her the dark mark on his wrist. Mama Obi's face, a landscape of wrinkles from years of laughter and worry, grew still and grave. She touched the mark gently, her fingers tracing the dark shape. "This is not a stain, my son," she said, her voice a low murmur. "It is a brand, a mark of ownership. The boy has been marked for the other side." She explained that some spirits, lost and without a home, wander the world, seeking a vessel to inhabit. They are not malevolent in a simple way. They are simply desperate. They don't have a soul of their own, so they need to borrow one from the living. And they find their victims not by force, but by a subtle invitation, an unspoken agreement. "The mark, Emeka," she said, her eyes fixed on his. "It's a key. The first door. You gave him an answer to a question he did not ask, and you showed him your heart's desire, to be seen, to have vision. And in that moment of connection, he left a part of himself with you. He left the mark of his touch." "Mama," Emeka's voice cracked. "What does he want?" "He wants to trade places. He wants to live again in the world of the living. And he has chosen you to be his doorway. You have to shut the door before he can walk through." Mama Obi took Emeka to see a revered elder in a nearby village, a man known only as Papa Kojo. He was a wizened, quiet man who lived in a hut surrounded by a garden of medicinal herbs and protective charms. Papa Kojo listened to their story without interruption, his eyes closed. When Emeka finished, the old man opened his eyes, and they were as clear as a forest stream. "The spirit seeks 3 things," he said, his voice like rustling leaves. "Your courage, your vision, and your will. He has touched your hand, the first step. You must now protect the rest." He gave Emeka a small gourd filled with a milky white liquid, a mixture of sacred herbs and ground cowries. "Tonight," Papa Kojo instructed, "you will go back to your room. You will pour this over your hand, over the mark. You will feel him. You will hear him. He will try to make you scared, but you must not be. Fear is the second door. You must not open it." That night, Emeka's room was eerily silent. He sat on his bed, the small gourd in his hand. He poured the liquid over the mark on his wrist. It felt like ice, a cold shock that traveled up his arm. The air grew heavy again, and he saw a flicker in the corner of the room. A dark shape, the same one as before, coalesced from the shadows. The figure of the stranger from the market. "You have been marked." The spirit's voice was a dry whisper, a sound like sand in the wind. "You are a vessel. My vessel. A temporary home." Emeka, remembering Papa Kojo's words, felt a surge of cold dread, but he held on to the image of the soaring eagle. He would not give in to fear. He focused on his breathing, on the quiet resolve in his heart. The shadow writhed and flickered, its form becoming a grotesque, swirling mass of darkness. "You have seen my mark, but you will not see my purpose," the spirit hissed. "You have been chosen, but you are not strong enough to refuse. Your vision is not your own. Your dreams are not your own. You have been chosen to see my past, my brokenness, my hunger." The air turned to thick, choking dust. Emeka's heart pounded. He wanted to scream, to run. But he held his ground, his eyes fixed on the spot where the shadow stood. He stared with a steady, unblinking gaze, and the shadow, sensing no fear, began to waver. It screamed a silent, agonizing scream, a sound that rattled the very walls of the room, then vanished into the night. The next morning, the mark on Emeka's hand had faded to a faint gray. It was still there, but it was no longer a black, ominous smudge. It was a sign of his struggle and his victory. A few days later, Emeka woke up from a terrible, vivid dream. He saw the stranger, not as a shadow, but as a young boy, a boy named Femi. Femi, in the dream, was an apprentice to a wise, old wood carver. He was an artist, just like Emeka, but Femi was proud, arrogant, and impatient. He wanted to be a master without putting in the work. He had visions of grand, magnificent art that he believed were his destiny, but he refused to listen to his master. In the dream, Femi argued with his master, saying, "I see the finished work in my mind's eye. Why must I waste time on these tiny, insignificant details?" His master shook his head. "The details, my boy, are where the spirit of the work lives. Without them, it is just a form, an empty shell. Femi, in a fit of pride, stormed out of his apprenticeship, believing his own vision was enough. He tried to create his magnificent works, but they were hollow, lifeless, and without substance. The community shunned him, and he grew bitter and resentful. He began to believe that his destiny had been stolen from him, that the world was conspiring against his greatness. One night, he made a pact with a dark entity. He offered his soul in exchange for the power to steal the visions and destinies of others. The entity granted his wish, but with a terrible price. He would wander the world, a hungry spirit, unable to rest, until he found a perfect host, a young artist who shared his desire for greatness. He would not be able to possess the host, he would only be able to borrow their soul and their name to fulfill his own destiny. When Emeka woke up, he felt a strange, cold clarity. He understood the stranger's purpose. The man wasn't just a monster, he was a cursed artist, a broken soul seeking to fulfill his lost dreams through others. He didn't want to hurt Emeka, he wanted to use him, to inhabit his body and use his art to create the masterpieces he could not. Emeka realized that he had to complete a task that would not only free him, but also grant Femi's spirit a final peace. Emeka returned to Papa Kojo, who listened patiently as Emeka recounted the dream. "You have seen his past," the old man said, his eyes a mixture of pride and sorrow. "You have seen his curse. The second door is now open. You must now close it for him, and for yourself. You must complete the work he could not finish." Papa Kojo gave Emeka a small, smooth, polished stone. "This is a gift from the earth," he said. "It is a piece of the world he abandoned. Go back to your shop. You must create something in his honor. A piece of art that represents his lost vision, but also your courage. You must make it with your hands, and you must make it with a clean heart." Emeka, now with a purpose, felt a renewed sense of strength. He went back to his stall, and for days he worked tirelessly. He took a single block of wood and began to carve. He didn't use any of his digital tools, no computers, no printers. Just his hands, a sharp knife, and the wood. He carved a simple figure, a man, his head tilted back, his eyes staring at a distant, unreachable star. The man's hands were empty, his posture one of both hope and despair. Emeka, understanding Femi's arrogance and frustration, carved the figure with immense detail. The tiny lines on the man's face, the intricate patterns of his clothes, the delicate curls of his hair. Each cut was a prayer, a silent message to the spirit. On the third night, as he put the final touches on the carving, the air in his room grew cold again. He looked up, and the shadow of the man stood in the corner of the room. This time there was no menace in its form, only a profound sadness. "You have seen me," the spirit's voice was softer now. "You have seen my curse. I lost my way. I lost my gift. I was so full of pride that I thought I could command my own destiny." Emeka held up the finished carving. "I have seen," he said, his voice steady. "I have seen the artist you could have been. I have seen the work you abandoned. I have honored your vision, but I have not forgotten the details." He placed the carving on the table. The spirit's shadow seemed to stare at the small wooden figure. The luminescent points of light in his eyes wavered, then dimmed. He reached out a hand, and for the first time, Emeka saw a hand of flesh and bone, a hand that was not a shadow. The man's hand reached out and touched the carving, his fingers tracing the delicate lines of the figure's face. Then a single tear, a tear made of pure, ethereal light, fell from the spirit's eye and landed on the wooden carving. The carving glowed with a soft, warm light, and then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the spirit was gone. The next morning, the mark on Emeka's wrist was gone. Only a faint white scar remained, a small, barely visible line that was a reminder of his ordeal. The carving, however, remained. It was no longer just a piece of wood. It was a masterpiece, a work of art that captured the profound sadness and beauty of a soul finally at peace. Weeks later, Emeka was a different man. He was no longer a boy with a laptop full of anxiety. He was an artist with a purpose. His new work, a series of carvings inspired by his spiritual journey, began to draw a crowd at his stall. People were captivated by his art, by the profound depth and detail in his carvings. They saw something in them, a story of struggle and resilience that they couldn't quite put into words. One day, an old man, a woodcarver with a gentle smile and tired eyes, came to his stall. He looked at Emeka's carvings, his gaze lingering on the one Emeka had made for the spirit. "This piece," the old man said, his voice a quiet rasp. "It has a soul. I haven't seen a work like this in many years. There was a young man a long time ago, an apprentice of mine, who had a vision just like this. He was a great artist, but he was lost to his pride." Emeka, his heart full, nodded. He knew the man was talking about Femi's master. He knew that the story had come full circle. The spirits are not all evil. Some are just lost. Some are just looking for a way home. Some are looking for a gentle hand to guide them. And Emeka, the young graphic designer, the new artist in the market, was the one who was brave enough to answer. He didn't just survive the stranger's mark, he embraced it. He turned a curse into a gift, a brand of despair into a sign of his destiny. And his story, a story of a lost soul and a found artist, was a lesson for all of us. Be careful what you touch, be mindful of your unspoken desires, and always, always protect your vision. Because sometimes the greatest art is not what we create, but what we redeem.